Alright, what's good, y'all? Welcome back. This is the last part of the mysterious slash lost locations iceberg. So we finally about to finish this thing up. If you want to check out the other parts, I'll link the whole playlist below. And just make sure you guys like and subscribe, man. I'm trying to make this shit work, you feel me? So let's get it. Alright, so first up is Inaccessible Land. So Inaccessible Land, what it actually is it's just this extinct volcano that was last active about 6 million years ago. And the island itself is about 12.5 kilometers, like square area kind of thing. And the island is part of this archipelago of different islands. It's part of the Tristan da Cunha archipelago, which is part of like the United Kingdom's territories. And basically, Tristan da Cunha is only accessible by a 7-day voyage, which you have to leave from Cape Town, which is in South Africa. And basically, you can only land on inaccessible land like a few days out of the year, because other than that it's just inaccessible, like the name suggests, you know what I mean? But anyways, there's two suspected reasons as to why it's called Inaccessible Land. The first one is that on newly found maps, that like basically when these Dutch crews would like sail by it, they weren't able to reach the interior of this island, so they just marked it on the map as Inaccessible Land. And the other one claims that this French captain named D'Echeverrian, that he renamed the island in 1778 after not being able to land on it. And basically, at least 3 confirmed shipwrecks have occurred off the coast of Inaccessible Land. The first was Blendon Hall, which is a British ship which set sail around 1821. It had about 54 people on board, which was like the passengers and the crew on the ship. And basically, they were heading towards Bombay. And the captain, which his name was Alexander Grieg, he intended to sail past St. Helena, but like these crazy winds and currents and stuff carried the ship all the way to Tristan da Cunha. Basically, the ship got caught up in seaweed, and on July 22nd, it drifted aground onto Inaccessible Land. And during this whole shipwreck, 2 people died out of all 54. So they still have 52 people at this point. And basically, they spent the next few months surviving on like wild celery, seals, penguins, and albatross. Now, these people, a few months later, they were able to build another boat. They were able to build actually 2 boats. The first one, they attempted to sail back to Tristan, and basically it wrecked and they lost 6 people. The second one, they basically were able to get there and alert the Tristans about the like whole shipwreck and everything. And the remainder of these people who like were saved basically were brought back to Tristan, and then they were brought back over to Cape Town at some point. And the other 2 shipwrecks that had happened on this island were the wreck of the Shakespeare at Pig Beach in 1883 and the Hellenisy at North Point in 1897. So that's that one. Nothing too crazy, but we're going on to the next one. Alright, so up next is the Cucuteni slash Trypillian settlements. The Cuckoo slash Trypillia culture is also known as Trypillian culture. Basically, it's this Neolithic slash Eneolithic archaeological culture. And basically, it was around from about 5500 to 2750 BC. And basically, they were around like Eastern Europe kind of area. They extended from the Carpathian Mountains to the Dniester and Dnieper, which is like now on modern day Moldova, and covering substantial parts of Western Ukraine and northeastern like Romania. So it's all in like that general kind of area. Basically, the majority of these settlements consisted of high density small settlements that were like basically concentrated mainly in the Siret, Prut, and Dniester river valleys. During its middle phase, which was around 4000 to 3500 BC, populations belonging to the Cuckoo slash Trypilli culture built the largest settlements in all of the Neolithic Europe. And basically, some of these contained as many as 3,000 structures, so like 3,000 buildings, and they were inhabited by possibly as many as about 20,000 to 46,000 people. That's a lot of people back then. Like, you gotta think about it. I mean, big cities and stuff weren't really, yeah, they were popping, but like not crazy, not way back then, you know what I mean? They didn't even have like real technological growth back then, or at least not that we know of. One of the most notable aspects of their whole culture was this periodic destruction of the settlements, with each single habitation site having a lifetime of roughly 60 to 80 years. So basically, these people would set up shop, and around 60 to 80 years, they would burn the place, like destroy it, not leave like a trace basically, and then move on, set up shop again, so on and so forth kind of thing. So they were kind of nomadic, but not exactly, because they were staying put for multiple decades, you know what I mean, almost a century, and then they would just dip out. Anyways, the purpose of these burnings, these settlements, is a subject of debate among many people. Some of the settlements were reconstructed several times on top of like earlier kind of settlements. So they would build a settlement, burn it, travel around, circle back, build one again on top of something that's already been burned. So they were just like circling back and forth basically. Around the 1990s and early 2000s, another theory regarding the end of the Cucuteni / Trypillian culture emerged based on climate change that took place around the end of their like entire existence, and that is known as the Blight / Coriander subboreal phase, which began around 3200 BC. And this is when the Earth's climate became colder and drier than it had ever been since the end of the last ice age, resulting in the worst droughts throughout the history of Europe since the beginning of agriculture. Basically, this thing just like was wiping out crops. It was too dry, you know what I mean? Couldn't really grow anything, so, you know what I mean? It was basically a big drought, you know what I mean? Big famine at the end of the day. Especially because their cultures relied like a ton on farming and all that stuff, you know what I mean? It was like a really good agricultural culture type of thing. So anyways, a lot of people just think that they ended up collapsing under this, and basically the conditions around this time when they would have collapsed are similar to another thing that I talked about in my disaster iceberg, which is the Dust Bowl, which happened like around the Midwest of the United States in about like the 1930s. So if you want to go check that out, because that's basically what they were going through, same type of time, just different age, you know what I mean? So we're moving on to the next one. All right, my bad guys, that last one was a long one, but this one's a short one. So up next is the 7 giants in Russia. Are these mysterious series of rock formations located in the west of the Ural mountain range, which is one of the most remote areas in all of Russia. Basically, these 7 majestic stone pillars stand in the Tryosko-Pechgorsky district, but these things are in the Autonomous Republic of Komi and have been named among the 7 wonders of Russia. These monoliths measure a height ranging from 30 to 42 meters, and they're arranged in like this big circle, 6 of which are like really like kind of close together and lined up on this hill, and then the 7th one that's just kind of like a little bit away. And basically these big ass like rock columns, they date back 200 to 300 million years and are the result of erosion caused by wind and ice during the last ice age. So some researchers also believe that the pillars could have been a karstic origin, or formations caused by the dissolution of soluble rock layers. So what that is just saying is basically they think that the earth might have been covering it a lot more, and it just all eroded and just left these. So you can see like the different rock formations and stuff like that. All right, so up next is the Dabous Giraffes. So the Dabous Giraffes are these Neolithic petrographs by an unknown artist on the western side of the Air Mountains, which is in north central Niger in Africa. And basically the carvings are believed to have been done about 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, so somewhere in that range, during the African humid period when the region was less arid and the Sahara was a vast savanna. And basically these are the largest known animal petrographs in the world. These giraffe carvings were first recorded by French archaeologist Christian Dupuy, and basically he found these things in 1987. And basically it was documented by David Coulson in 1997 while on a photographic expedition to the site. So basically these 2 guys are the first people that actually saw it. One dude saw it, one guy photographed it. You know what I mean? Makes sense? These carvings are 6 meters, which are about 20 feet in height, and consist of 2 giraffes carved into the Dabous rock with a great amount of detail. And when you see the pictures, these things do look like giraffes. Like, not even like some little shitty carvings like how you're expecting it. These things are like pretty spot on with some giraffes. The rock itself is located on a slope of a small rocky outcropping of a sandstone in the first foothills of the Air Mountains. One of the giraffes is male, while the other one is a little smaller and is female. And in the surroundings, 828 images have been found engraved on the rocks, of which 704 are animals, including cows, giraffes, ostriches, antelopes, rhinos, lions, and camels, and 61 are humans. 17 are inscriptions in Tinfang, which is like an ancient language kind of thing. Basically, these engravings are so old and they're falling apart, and like they're basically being destroyed from human activity. A mold was made of the engravings for display, and an aluminum cast of the mold is on display at the airport of Agadir. So, alright, so up next is the Gulf of Khambhat. So basically, on the 19th of May in 2001, India's Union Minister for Human Resource Development, Science and Technology Division, Murli Manohar Joshi, this guy announced that the ruins of an ancient civilization had been discovered off the coast of Gujarat in the Gulf of Khambhat. The site was discovered while they were performing routine pollution studies using sonar, and basically it was described as an area of regularly spaced geometric structures. It is located 20 kilometers from the Gujarat coast. It spans about 94 kilometers and can be found at a depth of about 30 to 40 kilometers, which is about like 98 to about like 140 feet or 130 feet more so. Basically, in his announcement, Joshi represented the site as an urban settlement that predated the Indus Valley civilization. So this thing was super old. Basically, they had never found anything this old in this area. Further descriptions on the site by Joshi describe it as containing regularly spaced dwellings, a granary, a bath, a citadel, and a drainage system. So these people were kind of having it lit, you know what I mean? They even had a drainage system. I mean, as long as you got some plumbing and stuff, I mean, what else you really need at the end of the day? Because some good toilet paper, that's really it. A follow-up investigation was conducted by NIOT or NIOT in November of 2001, which included dredging up like to actually recover these artifacts from the dirt. So they actually started to dig it up, and sonar scans, not scams, to actually detect the structures underground. And among the artifacts recovered were a piece of wood, pottery shards, weathered stones that were initially described as like some kind of hand tools, fossilized bones, and a tooth. Artifacts were sent to the National Geographic Research Institute. So basically they sent it all to this stuff, and the piece of wood was carbonated to be an age about 9,500 years old. So yeah, this structure, or this whole settlement, this whole whatever they even want to call it, I guess is a civilization. Super old, right around 10,000, like 9 to 10,000 years old. So super old shit, man. But anyways, moving on. All right, so up next is Baltia. So Baltia is also known as Basilia or Abius, and basically it's this mythical Greek / Roman island, supposedly located in the Baltic or North Sea, and sometimes it's confused with being like in the location of Prussia or Jutland or somewhere around their coastlines. Basically, this place was considered to be a major source of amber at the time. It's mentioned in the times of the ancient Greek states that the island is mentioned as being 3 days sail from Scythia, and in a few occult and ancient stories of the elder species, the island was meant to have been created when a massive chunk of amber slammed into the earth. Smaller shards were scattered throughout the world, spreading deposits all over the place, which is how we actually got amber. Although most of the stories say that the amber came from a depth of the void during the early days of the material plane and contained the trapped spirits of the never-born gods and their never-born minions. That's a fucking mouthful, bro. Holy shit. This was then blasted into the material plane at the start of the universe, along with the first inhabited world. Since the rest of the gods didn't want the contents escaping, they forced the amber to sail the multiverse until it was caught in the gravity of the well of the solar system. This led it to breaking apart as it sailed past the outer planets, with its slivers landing on many of these and their moons, and the main body still survived along with many shards that hit Earth, and that is how Baltia basically became a thing, and that's how all the stories suggest that it became a thing. But so up next is Kvenland. Basically, Kvenland is just this ancient name for an area of the Fennoscandinavia and Scandinavia kind of area. Kvenland is known from an old English account written in the 9th century, which uses information provided by a Norwegian adventurer and traveler named Othere, and from Nordic sources, primarily Icelandic. A possible additional source was written in the modern day area of Norway, and basically all Nordic sources date from the 12th and 13th centuries. So everything that mentions this place is around like the 12th and 13th centuries, at least from the Nordic sources. So this guy Othere, he basically said that the Norwegians' land was very long and very narrow, and to the east are wild mountains parallel to the cultivated land. Finns inhabited these mountains, then along with the land southwards, and on this other side of the mountain is Sweden. Along that land northwards, Kvenland, or Kvenland is, I guess, how they say it. It's spelled with a K, but they're pronouncing it with a C. Different views exist on ancient scholars have made references to Kvenland. Basically, no one really knows exactly it. This is just this guy Othere's actual like statement of them. And basically, a lot of references actually claim that Kvenland was dominated by a lot of women. And some have suggested that there have just been misinterpretations in the terminology with women. And basically, whatever etymology origin of the element Ven, it effortlessly translates to women in Old Norse. So a lot of people think that Kvenland or Kvenland, whatever, was actually just ran and dominated by women at the time, which was just super out of the norm if it was way back then. I mean, we move on to the next thing. All right, man. Up next is Zerzura. So Zerzura was long rumored to have existed in the deep desert west of the Nile River in Egypt or Libya, one of the two. In writings dating back to the 13th century, the authors spoke of a city which was as white as a dove, and they called it the Oasis of Little Birds. And basically, Zerzura is said to have been the city in the Sahara full of treasure with a sleeping king and queen. The city is guarded by black giants who keep anyone from going in or coming out. However, this may have been reference to the black Dabous people who were nomads in Chad and Libya and whose ancestors used to raid oases out in the Sahara. So basically, these people might have just been seeing actual people and calling them giant. I mean, who knows, you know what I mean? People might have been 7 foot tall and these people were 5 foot, you know what I mean? At that point, you a giant, cuz. So anyways, the first European reference to Zerzura is in an 1835 account by an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson, based on a report by an Arab who said he had found the oasis while searching for a lost camel, placed 5 days west of the track connecting the oasis of Fafara and Bahira. The oasis, called Wadi Zerzura, abounded in palms with springs and some ruins of some uncertain date. Basically, this thing had springs, palm trees, and some buildings on it, is what he was trying to say. More recently, though, European explorers made forays into a desert in search of Zerzura, but never succeeded in finding it. They said the main thing at the end of it was basically they said that it would never actually be solved by discovery. Like, Zerzura itself was just a legend, and it would actually never be discovered. It could not be found. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of just a waste of time looking for this one specific one, especially when you found all these other ones already. So all right, so up next is Tromelin Island. So Tromelin Island is basically just this flat, low-lying island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's about 450 kilometers east of Madagascar, and the island itself doesn't have much on it besides an airstrip and a weather station. But basically, back on July 31st of 1761, this French ship called Utile, which was a part of the French East India Company, it was chartered by Jean-Joseph de la Borde and commanded by Captain Jean de la Fargue. And basically this ship was transporting slaves from Madagascar to Mauritius, and during this it ran onto the reefs of the island. Basically, when the ship left, it had 160 Malagasy men, women, and children on board, and basically it was supposed to bring them into slavery onto Mauritius. Due to a navigation error, because they were using two conflicting charts, the vessel ended up crashing into the reefs of Tromelin Island, which was then called the Isle of Sand. And the ship was a frigate, not a slave ship, and thus was not equipped with the shackles and chains usually found on a slave ship. So basically, after the wreck, the crew and about 60 Malagasy people managed to reach the island. The crew retrieved various equipment, including food and wood from the wreckage. They dug a well, providing drinking water, and they fed on salvaged food, turtles, and seabirds. Now, Captain Jean lost his mind as a result of the wreck. Basically, this dude went completely insane, and he was then replaced by the first lieutenant, who was the second in command, called Barthélemy Castellan du Vernet. That's a mouthful, my guy. Castellian had built 2 camps, one for the crew and one for the slaves. He built a forge and an oven, and with the materials recovered from the wreckage, he began construction of a boat. Now, a few months later, on the 27th of September in 1761, a contingent of 122 French sailors, crew, and officers left Tromelin aboard the Providence, and basically they left the surviving slaves, which was about 60 people, men and women. They left them on this deserted island, and they promised them that they would come back one day. Remember that. It was not until the 29th of November 1776, which was 15 years after the original sinking of this ship, he reached the Tromelin Island and rescued the survivors. 7 women and an 8-month-old child. Tromelin Langway discovered that the survivors were dressed in plaited feather clothes and that they had managed during all these years to keep a fire lit. Despite, like I said, despite this island is not big. Like, look it up, it is small. All it has is this little airstrip and a weather station. They don't have that much foliage or trees, so they kept this fire lit for 15 years, man. That's something that I don't even know how they really did that, to be honest, but good for them, because that's probably one of the things that really helped them out during that time. The Maganese people who had been left on the bleak little island built a shed with coral stones, and for most of the wood had been used during the construction of the raft by the crew that had left the island. They also built a lookout on the highest point of the island in order to not miss a ship that would or could help them if they kind of came by. They were all from the central highlands of Madagascar and had no knowledge of how to produce food in the coastal environment, and most had died within the first few months on the island. The survivors, though, that this guy had picked up, they all remained with this guy Jacques, and basically when he declared them free and offered to bring them back to Madagascar, they all refused and they chose to just stay with this guy and like basically be boys, you know what I mean? Like, yo, that's just crazy. So hey, shout out to him, man. He's a real one. He actually went back and saved them, I guess. Good for him. But we're moving on. Only 2 things left on this. My bad, that one took forever, man. All right, so up next is the singing sand dunes of Liwa. So, according to local legend, evil spirits whisper names to disorient travelers and drag them into danger, singing through the moaning tons of the sand dunes. From beneath footsteps and car wheels, a deep roaring tone comes from the sand. The sound has been compared to the low note of the didgeridoo, which or a low flying plane. So this thing is pretty loud. Now, back in the 1200s, Marco Polo, yes, the Marco Polo, in this dude's journeys through the dunes of China, he said he was struck by the sounds of all kinds of musical instruments and also of drums and the clash of arms. So, pretty reputable guy that's saying that he's heard this shit, you know what I mean? Now, the phenomenon is caused by the vibrations of the grains of the sand that fall on top of each other, and the study of it is pretty new. However, the physicists debate that the model that most accurately describes the mechanism is basically this, you know what I mean? That's like the best way to describe it, is that when they fall on top of each other, the vibrations cause these noises which sound like instruments and all this other stuff. Now, basically 30 locations worldwide, including ones in China and the US, have singing sand, but none, experts say, has as pronounced and mellifluous a sound as the giant dunes in the south of the UAE, which is the United Arab Emirates, which is basically where this Liwa kind of thing is. And basically the area is known as the Empty Quarter and stretches all the way into Saudi Arabia. So pretty terrifying stuff, thinking that fucking sand dunes are singing to you, trying to drag you in and sing up. All right, we finally hear the last thing on the entire iceberg, the graves of Beechey Island. So basically, Beechey Island is an island located in the Canadian Arctic archipelago of Nunavut. Is that, I think I say it? It's in Canada, and it's in the Wellington Channel. Beechey Island is best known for containing 3 graves of Franklin expedition members, which were first discovered in 1850 by searchers for the lost Franklin expedition. Now, basically, the searchers found a large stone along with the graves of 3 Franklin crew members: Petty Officer John Torrington, Royal Marine Private William Brain, and able seaman John Hartnell. RIP to y'all, man. but there was no written record nor indication of where Franklin planned to sail the next season after like this whole thing happened. Now, back in 1852, Commander Edward A. Inglefield arrived at Beechey along with the physician Dr. Peter Sutherland, and John Hartwell's graves was opened, damaging his coffin, and Hartnell's memorial plaque fell off his that was like placed on his coffin lid was removed. Now, basically, during a later expedition, a searcher named Thomas Morgan died aboard the vessel North Star on May 22nd in 1854, and he was also buried alongside these 3 other graves of the Franklin crew members. So now there's 4 graves. All right, you gotta remember this. Now there's 4 people buried here, 3 graves, and then the one dude, Thomas Morgan, who had died on the North vessel, which was not a part of the Franklin expedition. Now, in the 1980s, during 2 separate expeditions to Beechey, Canadian forensic anthropologist Dr. Owen Beatty examined the 3 bodies and found them externally remarkably well preserved. So basically, these things were like still perfectly new, like they were basically just died, you know what I mean? Autopsies determined that lung disease and lead poisoning were among the probable causes of death. Basically, stuff to survive on. They brought them in these tins which had lead and basically caused them to have lead poisoning, which was the thought to be the thing that actually killed them. Later studies would suggest that the unique water distillation system used by the ships was a major source of lead poisoning. So, end of the day, a lot of researchers are just thinking that lead poisoning was the thing that killed these guys, but it took a whole more than 100 years. You know what I mean? It took more than 100 years to even figure out what actually happened to these guys. And that's it. That's the whole mysterious locations, lost locations, iceberg, whatever you want to call it. Shout out to the dude that made this. I'm going to tag the original iceberg image down below, and I'll put all the episodes of all the other episodes that I did in this thing. And yeah, up next though, you know what I mean, I'm going to be doing some missing people kind of stories. Just a bunch of weird shit, you know, conspiracies, anything that I really want to talk about. But if there's something that y'all want to hear, let me know and I'll look into it. If it's something I like, then I'll do a video on it or whatever. But anyways, other than that, make sure y'all check out the brand, because if you make it this far, trust me, you feel me, we got some fire shit dropping soon. You see the logo right there, because it's always in back of me. But anyways, other than that, man, make sure y'all get laid, y'all stay dangerous and free to guys. I'll catch y'all later.